The tight end position proved itself more than ever to be the hardest position to figure out in fantasy football in week 1 of the NFL season. So we're going through the top 15 tight end rankings today, and there's a lot of new faces in new places here. So starting out with our first tier right here, we're going with Sam Laporta, Trey McBride, and George Kittle. These are the top guys before the NFL season actually started, and they were all guys that maintained a steady target share in this offense. So with Sam Laporta last week, he obviously doesn't come out and do exactly what you wanted him to do, but he did end the game with 5 targets, and he caught 4 balls. He had 45 total yards, so he still maintained involvement in this offense. Now, he's going home to take on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this week, and I ultimately do think that they will win against the Buccaneers. So just based on Sam Laporta's explosion that he can provide at the tight end position, and based on the offensive efficiency that the Detroit Lions possesses, he's still going to be my number 1 guy. And at number 2, Trey McBride was honestly, like, people need to just kind of calm down a little bit with Trey McBride. I actually feel really good about Trey McBride. Trey McBride was second in the week at the tight end position with targets. He had 9 total targets last week. They just didn't convert on him. And I watched that full game. When I watched that game back, there was just a lot of moments where Kyler missed some balls with Trey McBride. Like, he could have hit Trey McBride down the sidelines for like a 20 or 30 yard pass, and he just overthrew him a little bit. So it was just, the timing was just a little bit off. With that target share, we know how involved Trey McBride is going to be. That's step number 1. So with all these tight ends here, I'm trying to look for who is getting targeted very frequently in their offense. And Trey McBride, we know the targets are going to be there. We know the talent is there. We know the chemistry with Kyler is there. It was week 1. He's shaking off Russ. So I'm willing to let this one slide. And against the Los Angeles Rams this week in a divisional matchup, I'm going to take Trey McBride at 2. George Kittle is at number 3 at the Minnesota Vikings this week. Now, George Kittle was one of the best tight ends on the week, and he only had 6 points. Like, Isaiah Likely was one of only 3 tight ends to score more than 10 fantasy points this week in a half PPR format. And George Kittle, ironically, was a top 10 tight end this week. Crazy week in tight end position. But he had 5 targets. And it was a very similar stat line to what Sam Laporta saw. 4 catches on 5 targets for 40 yards. Didn't have a touchdown in this game, but we know he's very capable of it. So just given the upside that we know that Kittle has as a player, with Ayuk's combined with Ayuk's slower start, I'm going to ultimately go with George Kittle here at the tight end position. And I'm doing everything I can to make sure we're ready for week 2 fantasy football. So please go down there and drop a like on this video and subscribe to the channel to show your support if you're getting value from this video today. Now, dropping down to our next tier right here. Brock Bowers actually was a total shock for me. He had 8 targets in that game last week against the Chargers. Now, Brock Bowers has a brutal matchup this week in Baltimore taking on the Ravens. So the reason he's down here, a tier below when he had 8 targets last week, is for that very reason. Now, he ended up being pretty efficient on his work. 6 catches on 8 targets, 58 yards. But again, this matchup against the Ravens scares me. I don't think that they're going to be able to use Brock Bowers as efficiently as they did against the Chargers. So I think they're going to get crushed this week against the Ravens. I think this is going to be maybe a down game, but based on targets that he got last week and efficiency that he had, and based on what we saw from everybody else in the tight end position, Brock Bowers definitely deserves to be in the top 5 this week. Travis Kelce at number 5. Travis Kelce is just not going to be the same guy this year. And I've been on this one for over a year. Travis Kelce is just not the same guy. He's in his mid-30s. This dude is not the number 1 anymore in this offense. But of course, he still is a Hall of Fame player. So he's going to get you, at some point, a good game. It could be the week. He had 4 targets last week, caught 3 balls for 34 total yards. So it's not like he was irrelevant in this offense. But again, he's not the number 1 anymore. So don't count on him for number 1 tight end production. What you can count on is this matchup is juicy. Against the Bengals, I want the matchup here. And I do think that Travis Kelce, any week, you can't bench him because you know that he can provide you 2 touchdown, 3 touchdown games, even at this point in his career. Now, Colby Parkinson is at number 6. That's how uncertain I am about the tight end landscape, basically beyond this point. Colby Parkinson at the Arizona Cardinals this week, tight end for the Los Angeles Rams, I think is going to be a really direct benefit of Puka Nacua not being there. Colby Parkinson was involved in week 1. 4 catches on 5 targets for 47 yards. Again, very similar stat line to Laporta and George Kittle. Reason he's not in those guys tier is because I just believe in those guys as talents more, and I know that they have more ability to hit on big plays than a guy like Colby Parkinson does. But the reality is, with Colby Parkinson, this target number could even go up this week. So this is a guy who is volatile. He could easily outperform this ranking. He could easily underperform this ranking. But Colby Parkinson, just based on importance, I think it's going to be there. That's why I'm comfortable having him here at number 6 this week. Now, dropping down to our next tier, we begin massive uncertainty area with big upside. Dalton Kincaid at 7 and Juwan Johnson at 8. Dalton Kincaid against the Miami Dolphins 2 nights in Miami. Oh my gosh, he was one of the biggest duds of the week last week, and I drafted him in so many places. It sucked having Isaiah Likely on the bench behind Dalton Kincaid. The reality with Kincaid is, I've been saying it, like, there will be a Dawson Knox effect, and there was immediately. Ultimately, I just don't know how the Buffalo Bills can convince themselves to keep doing this and keep having Kincaid not involved in this offense. Maybe it's a pipe dream. Maybe I'm just hoping. But I'm having him here at 7 because we know the big play upside is there. And with Josh Allen, the target upside, if he gets it, is ridiculously high. So if he gets the targets this week, again, pipe dream maybe, but I'm counting on it this week. So hopefully, please God, Dalton Kincaid here at number 7. Juwan Johnson at 8. Juwan Johnson comes away with a touchdown last week. He's taking on the Cowboys in Dallas this week, so the matchup is brutal. But he comes down with a touchdown on 3 targets. Now, this guy is only higher this week than I want to put him because Foster Moreau, the other tight end who did well last week for the Saints, is actually dealing with an injury this week. So I'll go ahead and factor that in. Say Juwan Johnson just has better shot of being a fantasy producer this week at the tight end position for the New Orleans Saints. Again, very tough matchup. That's why he's in the uncertainty tier. Now, Evan Ingram is at number 9. Against the Cleveland Browns at home, and Evan Ingram was another big-time stinker at the tight end position in week 1. 4 targets, 1 catch for 5 yards. Gross production. But again, 4 targets. This guy will be important in this offense. He will have a role in this offense on a week-to-week basis. Against the Browns, I don't love the matchup particularly so, but I do like the player, and I do think that overall, like, at the end of the season, we'll look back, and this game really won't have much of a mark on his fantasy production. I think he'll start producing. 4 targets shows that he was important to the offense. It's always hard to predict week 1, but obviously Evan Ingram was a dud last week, and I'm hoping for better production here. Hoping is the very key word in this tier, guys. And to round this tier out, my 2 Ravens. Mark Andrews lands at 10, and Isaiah Likely lands at 11. I don't think you can overreact or underreact to Mark Andrews. It was a problem, but it's not the end of the world. Mark Andrews, you have to remember, was in a car crash a couple weeks ago. Dude is probably still recovering. Mentally, I'm sure that had an effect on dude. He's also in a situation where maybe there was an injury that he was still not recovered from, like the injury that he had before the actual game started. So the reality is, I think Andrews will have a rebound week against the Raiders this week. It's perfect. Like, it's the perfect rebound week for a guy like Mark Andrews, which is why I do prefer him over Likely this week. Isaiah Likely, I like him though. Because again, what you have to remember about Isaiah Likely is he did not do this last week in place of Andrews. No. He did it alongside Mark Andrews in 2 tight end sets. They'd be stupid to not use 2 tight end sets. The Ravens are not stupid. They're going to continue to utilize this. They've been talking about it all offseason, utilizing 2 tight end sets. We just finally saw it come to fruition in week 1. So Likely's not going anywhere, but that doesn't mean Mark Andrews is a problem. And I'll tell you one thing that's not an uncertainty. CeeDee Lamb's line on Underdog this week. They've got him as a free pick, getting higher or lower than half a total yard. So you need to take advantage of this because you need some certainty in your life. And if you haven't done so already, go down in the comments, use that link in the comments, and when you use code FFN to sign up for Underdog, they'll match your first deposit 50% up to $1,000 in free bonus cash. And you'll also be able to get in on this certain free line with CeeDee Lamb this week. So use code FFN to do it. Now, dropping down to our last tier right here. Kyle Pitts at number 12 over in Philadelphia this week. Now, Kyle Pitts may feel low for a lot of you. Kyle Pitts last week was a top 3 tight end in fantasy. Why is he this low? Look at his stat line. 3 catches on 3 targets at 26 yards and a touchdown. He got in the end zone, but he only had 3 targets. So he was really no more involved than Drake London. It's just that he got the touchdown and Drake London didn't. So against a Philadelphia matchup in Philadelphia in a hostile environment, this is a gross matchup for me. It's a gross matchup. And like, Kyle Pitts could outperform this. He definitely could. But based on 3 targets last week, based on the way this offense looks, and based on what I know about Kirk Cousins in primetime, not wild on Pitts this week personally. Dallas Goedert's at 13 here versus the Atlanta Falcons. And I just think that Dallas Goedert is just not a particularly great player anymore. But I do have to say, Dallas Goedert was involved last week. 5 targets, 4 catches, 31 yards. I just don't think he's that great. And he's not ultimately a key piece of the Philadelphia offense. He's relevant enough to where it's like he'll probably be in the top 15 for me in a lot of weeks, unless he gets injured. But ultimately, I just don't have too much confidence in Dallas Goedert. This is my not confident tier, of course, at this point with the tight end position. Pat Freiermuth is at 14 against the Denver Broncos. In Denver, not a big Pat Freiermuth guy. But again, was involved. 4 catches, 4 targets, 27 yards. Very little upside in the Pittsburgh Steelers offense. But again, with 4 targets, like, that's what we're working with at tight end here. Like, that's what we're working with right now. So I don't really have a ton more to say about Pat Freiermuth in particular because I don't love the player. I hate the offense. And I think that this matchup in Denver is going to be tougher than it was against the Atlanta Falcons, because the reality with Pat Freiermuth is, again, they had a home game basically. If you watch that Steelers Falcons game, Steelers fans infiltrated that stadium. That was almost a home game. Denver is not going to be like that. So ultimately, I just think that Pat Freiermuth is not a high upside guy. That's why he's down here at 14. I've got a new face. Theo Johnson of the New York Giants taking on the Washington Commanders in Washington this week. Who is Theo Johnson? Rookie tight end out of Penn State. Was originally drafted to replace Darren Waller. Theo Johnson started out as like 3rd on the depth chart or something like that. He quickly rose up when they realized all their options suck. So Theo Johnson comes in last week and is way more involved than people thought. 4 targets, only 1 catch, or 18 yards though. So he was efficient with the catch that he had, and he got 4 targets. Here's the betting on the fact that they use him more this week, because the Washington Commanders have a brutally bad defense, and the Giants are just in a situation where they're desperately needing playmakers. They're desperately needing somebody who can get open to be a reliable target for Daniel Jones, who sucks too. But the reality is that I think Malik Neighbors and Theo Johnson, and maybe some Wan'Dale Robinson mixed in there too, are going to be decent options this week. And that's exactly why I put Theo Johnson at the back of these tight end rankings. So let me know how your team looks at the tight end position in week 2. And if you want to see the top 30 running back rankings for week 2, click on this video right here.